All right, I think I got it here. So I'm gonna start up a little early. Today, October 23rd, just a week away from Halloween here, but the main thing is we are 11 weeks out of the 16-week semester into anatomy and physiology here with BIO201. I'm your professor, Dr. Sean Clavel. And again, as I mentioned, we are in week 11 of the semester here. So congrats so far. I'm going to turn myself up just a little bit on the microphone. All right, so congrats so far for making it this far. And let's take a look at some of the things we have ahead, some of the things I put into your canvas here. This is the muscular system. So primarily this section here, what we're talking about includes chapters 9, 10, and 11. We're talking about joints, so the articulations where our body moves. That includes also some of the body movement specifically. Let me get into that right quick here. So again, in chapter 9, we talked about some of the different classifications of joints, whether they are structural classifications. So if we talk about those structural classifications, I'm talking about what holds the bones together, right? So if a joint is classified or an articulation is classified as where two bones meet, those bones can be held together by fibrous or a ligament, right? So a fibrous type of joint is one that's held together by dense connective tissue, primarily a ligament. Cartilaginous joints are held together by either hyaline cartilage or fibrocartilage, and synovial joints don't have anything necessarily in between the space holding them. There's a cavity in between there that contains synovial fluid. So ultimately, the ligaments around that joint are held, and the synovial joints are the ones that we're commonly familiar with as the joints of movement. The functional type of classification here refers to how much movement is available, right? How much movement is available in a given joint. So you've got these synovial joints. Synovial joints are joints that are synarthroses joints. Those are immovable joints. Synarthroses, that's the first one there. Synarthroses are immovable joints. The amphiarthroses are semi-movable joints, and then the diarthroses are fully movable joints. So all diarthroses are, or let me put it this way, all synovial joints are diarthroses. And so you can see that here as we start to talk about some of our structures. But then we get into primarily the synovial joints, or the diarthrotic joints here, the ones that are related to movement. So the beginning of the chapter starts in with the classification of joints and being able to identify the different types of joints in the different body, like a fibrous joint, like the sutures of the skull, or even like this, your tooth in the socket, a gymphosis. Those are both fibrous joints that are also synarthrotic. Cartilaginous joints, like I said, could be hyaline cartilage, whether it's like your ribs, where your bone of your ribs attaches to your sternum, or fibrocartilage, or fibrocartilage, which is think about like your intervertebral disc, or the disc in between that, as well as the pubic symphysis. So you've got a pubic symphysis, and that is held together by fibrocartilage. Yeah, fibrocartilage. Then the synovial joints are the ones that we mentioned that are related to movement. This chapter also includes quite a bit of body movement. So I have provided also a resource here for you guys to use for this lab, not for this lab assignment, but for this upcoming practical. So if I give you the student view, I'm going to go into your canvas here. So we'll jump into the canvas here. You'll see that we've got our announcements right now. Go into modules. And so in chapter right here under additional resources for articulations, joints, and movements, you'll click on body movements. And so what I've prepared is a document. It doesn't have like any words associated with it, but it does have all of the movements that you should be familiar with as they're associated with let me see if I can make it a little bit bigger. There it is. That are associated with the body. So again, this might be mandibular elevation. So your jaw can elevate like you're going to chew. You can depress the mandible. You can laterally deviate the mandible, but you can also, let me come here, protraction, and retraction of the mandible. Those are two motions there. So I've provided this as a resource here. It doesn't have the terms here, but you'll have to go over and review them and review the terms. But I will say is that when you do something like this, you're going to want to know there's a couple of things that you want to do to get full credit. So in order to get full credit here, what you're going to want to do is you're going to have to tell me, the movement. So in this case, let me give you, let me go with like a flexion here. So we got head or neck or cervical flexion, as it might be called here, right? And so what you want to do is I'm getting a writing utensil here real fast for you guys. All right. All right, so here we go. There it is. Okay, so you can see here that this is indicating kind of a forward head motion here. This is flexion, head or neck flexion. So let me type this here. So what you want to do is you want to identify first and foremost the movement. So again, this is flexion. But you also want to identify either one of two things here. Is it the bone that is moving, right? So what, in this case, you could say the cranium or the head, or this case, or the joint that it's moving at. So you could say head, flexion, I'm okay with that. You could say cervical flexion, I'm okay with that. So those are the two you want to be. Those are the main things that you want. You want to be able to identify the joint, right? What is the joint that's moving? In this case, it's like the cervical flexion, or what is the bone that is moving? So let's take a look at a different example here that includes some of the extremities, right? Here's one, right? So this case, this individual is swinging his arms out to the side right there. This is a motion referred to as abduction or abduction, right? And so you could say that this is brachial, right? Because this is the upper arm that they're referring to. That could be brachial abduction. But you could also say it is, shoulder. But the technical term for your shoulder would also be the glenohumeral. So, or glenohumeral abduction, right? So, in order for full credit here, you're going to want to identify the joint, whether it's that's moving. So, in this case, shoulder joint, and this is abduction, right? Is the motion is abduction. Again, as I mentioned, what also would suffice is if you call this brachial or humeral, right? Humeral being the humerus that's moving, humerus abduction. Because again, what we're looking at here, maybe let me say that for the first time here. What we're looking at here is really just the angle here. So you can see here that this guy's angle in position 1 is here. The angle in position 2 is here. And the angle from position 3 is here. And ultimately, what we're really looking at is, I shouldn't have drew it that far down. All we're really looking at here is the lining of the trunk and the upper arm, right? Like that angle right there. So if we bring that up just a little bit higher, and there. And so that is the angle that's demonstrating us abduction, shoulder abduction, humerus abduction, brachial abduction. All any of those are appropriate answers for that right here. Okay, and so right there, that's in chapter 9. You'll see that here in chapter 9 underneath the additional resources. That first is body movements, so all of the pictures of the different body movements, untitled for your edification there. It is of, these are the pictures that I'll use for the practical. They are the pictures that I'll use for the practical. The next chapter here, let me get back into my slides. In chapter 10, we get into, so there it is, the different types of joints and the body movements in chapter 9. In chapter 10, we get into muscles, muscle tissue first, and then all of the different muscles of the body. So in chapter 10, the first thing that they do is review the different muscles in the you would find in the body. So not only is there skeletal muscle, and that's the one that's going to be most commonly referred throughout the semester. You've got skeletal muscle, you have cardiac, and the last one is what? Smooth muscle tissue, right? So smooth muscle tissue is the last. And smooth. So again, you've got 3 different types of muscle tissue here. You've got skeletal, cardiac, and smooth muscle tissue. You'll be asked to identify those, whether it's on a histology or each of them has special features, right? Each of them has some different features that you should be familiar with, whether it is the skeletal muscle with its long cylindrical shape. It has multiple nuclei and is under volitional control, right? We have to think about that for our muscles to contract, or the skeletal muscles, that is. Cardiac muscles have more of a short branched shape. There is traditionally only one nuclei for every cell in the cardiac muscle, and smooth muscle tissue also has one nuclei. Smooth muscle tissue also gets its name because it doesn't have the dark and light alternating bands that we see in skeletal muscle or in cardiac muscle. So those dark and light alternating bands are called striations. Then we go over the characteristics of muscle tissues, or the function of muscle tissue, which includes movement, but not only like movement, it also prevents us from moving, right? Like if gravity were just to have its way with me, I would fall to the ground. But my muscles keep me upright and maintain my posture. So not only does it initiate movement, but it stops movement as well. It's also key in thermoregulation, helping to maintain optimal body heat. So the energy that's released during activity requiring muscle contractions is lost in the form of heat. And ultimately, again, it helps with our maintaining the optimal body temperature. Cardiac muscle, we're going to continue staying on skeletal muscle here. There is some microscopic and gross anatomy of the muscle, everything from the muscle itself, which is comprised of a number of muscle fiber bundles. Those bundles of muscle fibers are called fascicles, and then ultimately the fascicles are made up by a number of different muscle fibers. From the muscle fiber, we can go down a little bit further to the microscopic level, where we look at those myofibrils, which are these long protein strands that are comprised of alternating sarcomeres. A sarcomere is actually the smallest functional unit of a contracting skeletal muscle, and it has some key characteristics that we should be familiar with, and that's really the key topics of the gross and microscopic anatomy of the muscle. And then finally, in chapter 10, we will review the steps of a skeletal muscle contraction. So primarily, I break down the stages or the steps of a skeletal muscle contraction into 3 major groups. And so those groups are, as you can see them here, the groups include excitation. So excitation, all the steps that occur for the nerve to stimulate the muscle. Excitation, contraction, coupling. And in excitation, contraction, coupling, what we have is the steps that occur from the nerve stimulation to the actual contraction of the muscle, where it actually starts to build tension. And then ultimately the power, I call it the power stroke. I should just call it, let me fix that there. The better term for it is probably going to be the cross bridge cycling. The better term is going to be cross bridge cycling. And so you should be familiar with all the steps of a skeletal muscle contraction here. And so I have provided a resource, a couple of resources here. All right, give it a student view. So as I mentioned, I did provide some resources here. So if you go into modules now under chapter 10, so we looked at joints, articulations. Remember, that's where the body movements are. But this one here I want to review is these video tutorials. So there's 1, 2, 3 tutorials. They're no more than 3 minutes or so each, and they're pretty dense, right? Like they go over quite a bit as it relates to each of these topics. So the first one is, as we mentioned, excitation, or even we may refer to it as the events that occur at the neuromuscular junction. But give it the big view here. What you'll see is, again, just a short video explaining some of the major steps that occur during a skeletal muscle contraction. And so that is in your canvas. It's broken up into 3 different sections. The first one here is called excitation. You can see that there's a synaptic bulb here of the axon, and then the motor end plate with a very small space in between. The synaptic bulb will release the neurotransmitters to bind onto the cell membrane and cause an action potential to travel down there. And that's the first one there. So again, if you go to modules, underneath modules, you'll see that there is the additional resources: muscle tissue, video tutorial 1, video tutorial 2, and video tutorial 3 are the ones that you're going to be most helpful for identifying the stages or steps of a skeletal muscle contraction. And so that's chapter 10, right? Chapter 10, we talked about muscle tissue, the different types of muscle tissue, characteristics of skeletal muscle tissue, microscopic and gross anatomy of the muscle, and the steps of a muscle contraction. And in chapter 11, the muscular system is really, it's kind of a little bit of a rote memorization here. We're just listing muscles of the body. And you'll see pictures. So what you should be familiar with is the picture of a muscle, right? What is the name of that muscle? What is its insertion, meaning its distal? What is its origin, meaning what is its proximal attachment point? What is the insertion, meaning what is its distal attachment point? And as the result, what is its action? And so let's take a look at a couple of examples here. Actually, let me show you what I've created as a supplement to this chapter here. So now if you go to chapter chapter 11 additional material, what you'll see is that there is a list. There's actually 2 things that you want to take a look at. The first is, give a student view here. Here it is. Okay. The first is, come on. Right here, the master muscle list. So the master muscle list is all of the muscles that you'll be asked to know or identify. You can see it's right here. So that's on your canvas. I take a look at that. Here's all the muscles: muscles of the face, head, and neck, muscles of the abdomen, muscles of the chest, shoulder, and upper arm, muscles of the hip and the lower limb. So these are the list here. There's a few muscles that you should be able to identify, and concept is, what should I know? So here's what you guys want to know. Be able to identify it if you saw it in a picture, right? If you saw this muscle in a picture, could you identify it? The second is, what is its origin? Where does this muscle start? Where does the muscle end? And as a result, what is its actions? So what I have done for you guys is, let me find out where it is. Go to course modules there. Let me. Let me see if I can't pull it up here. Okay. So what I've done here is, if you go to your canvas, give a student view here for this one. Go to modules. Again, just below the master muscle list, you'll see that there is quote-unquote flashcards. It's a PowerPoint that I'm still working on a little bit, but here it is. You can see here that there are different muscles, and each of those muscles is identifying, again, its, pick one here, origin, insertion, and action. So this muscle here, referred to as orbicularis oris, is a muscle that is a sphincter muscle or a circular muscle around the eye. It originates, let me put it that way, it originates at the frontal bone, that's up here, as well as the maxilla. So the maxilla runs up here. It inserts into the tissues around the eye. And what does it do? It blinks and closes the eye. So I'll give you one more kind of an example on the arm for a muscle around the arms and legs. Excuse me. Triceps, right? Let's pick your triceps. So because we could get this into your head a little bit sooner. So your triceps are made up of 3 heads. So you've got a short head here, the infraglenoid tubercle. So there's the region below the glenoid fossa. There's the, let me just zoom in there for you. Didn't work out so well. There it is. Okay. So what you'll see here in this picture is that there's 3 origins, right? The infraglenoid tubercle right there. The other one is on the posterior border portion of the humerus here. And then if you could see a little bit more medially is the other one that we're talking about, the triceps head. So those tricep heads there, the tricep has 3 origins. The origins include the infraglenoid tubercle of the scapula, the posterior shaft of the humerus, and the lateral border of the scapula. It inserts into the olecranon process and is responsible for elbow extension. And so the list that I have here is expansive. It's probably more than the muscles that you will need to know, but it is a great resource that you can use and have for the years. As muscles are a big topic of kind of movement and all those components there. So again, that is under additional resources for the muscular system. There's the master muscle list. You'll know all those muscles by the end here. There's the muscles flashcard right there. And then Chapter 10, video tutorials, that'll be helpful, and ultimately the body movements for your Chapter 9 material. All right. I think that's all I got for you guys here today. So, you guys continue up on the good hard work that you're completing here. I am grateful for all of your hard work and dedication. And as we finish out this semester, just what, little more than 4 weeks left, we'll finish out strong and we will continue to put out quality work. And I look forward to your responses here throughout the week and all the way into the end of the semester. Thank you guys, and take care.